true story told by later generations. The Cursed House in Savannah Part 2. Kara and Mason stood frozen at the entrance to this secret basement. The cold, damp air rushed into their lungs, enveloping them both. The deep darkness below beckoned them to enter, but also warned them of the dangers that awaited. Kara could feel the presence of spirits in the house, the heavy, gloomy feeling more evident than ever. Kara lit the flashlight and walked down the old wooden stairs with Mason, the creaking sound echoing hauntingly under each step. The deeper she went, the more eerie the sounds became. Whispers echoed from the darkness, like the sighs of trapped souls. Kara felt her palms sweat as she gripped the flashlight handle, determined to press on. Everything inside her screamed that she was facing something more terrifying than anything she had ever imagined. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a large, dark room. Kara was greeted by a sight she could never have prepared for. The room was surrounded by thick brick walls, covered in strange symbols and signs drawn in a dark liquid she couldn't identify. The symbols looked like they had been written by a mad hand, intricate and confusing, making the room feel oppressive and mysterious. In the center of the room sat an ancient stone table. On it were strange objects, wooden boxes, ancient oil lamps, and other old artifacts, all of them weathered and out of this world. But what caught Kara and Mason's attention most was a large silver chest secured with a rusty padlock. Mason stepped toward the chest, his eyes alight with curiosity and caution. "This is it," he whispered, as if afraid to speak aloud for fear of awakening something inside. Amelia mentioned a chest in her diary. This might be where the cursed heart the Briarwoods used in their dark rituals was stored. Kara approached the silver chest, her heart pounding. This was what she and Mason had been searching for, the heart of the curse, and perhaps the key to freeing the spirits trapped in the house. She took a deep breath and bent down to touch the lock. As soon as her hand touched the chest, a cold wind blew past, as if the air around them was being sucked out. Kara felt her body shiver, but she knew she couldn't stop. Mason pulled out a small antique key from his pocket that they had found in Amelia's room. "This might be the key to the chest," he said, his eyes intense as he looked at Kara. The two exchanged glances, and Kara nodded. Mason slowly inserted the key into the rusty lock, turning it gently. The click echoed in the silence, as if the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Kara and Mason held their breaths as they slowly opened the chest. Inside the chest was a pitch-black heart, still beating softly, as if it belonged to a living body. The black heart was covered in dried blood and strange black vines, looking like something that had been sealed away for a long time, but its power had not been completely destroyed. When Kara saw it, She felt a wave of nausea rise in her throat, and a numbing coldness covered her entire body. "That's it," Mason whispered, his eyes never leaving the black heart in the chest. "This is the center of the curse." As Mason said that, the entire room suddenly shook violently. The walls seemed to come alive, emitting strange noises. The symbols on the walls lit up, emitting a red light, as if they were warning them that they had just touched something extremely dangerous. Screams rang out from somewhere in the surrounding space, mixing with the howling wind. And Kara knew they were surrounded by spirits trying to escape this basement. The room became dark and suffocating. A heavy pressure pressed down on Kara's chest, making it hard to breathe. Shadowy figures began to appear from the corners, the silhouettes of souls trapped in the house for centuries. They flooded into the room, their eyes empty, but filled with pain and resentment. One of the spirits, the woman in the white dress Kara had seen in the mirror, approached them. Her eyes were red, but she had no intention of harming them. Kara felt a chill rise in her as the spirit opened her mouth, her voice weak but urgent. "Free us. Destroy that heart, or we will be trapped here forever." Kara looked at Mason. They both knew what they had to do, but destroying the heart would not only end the curse, but could have unforeseen consequences. "What do you think, Kara?" Mason asked, his voice shaky but determined. Kara did not answer right away. She felt the weight of all the souls surrounding her, as if they were waiting for her decision. The black heart still beat steadily, each beat defying any attempt to destroy it. "We have no choice," Kara said, her voice full of determination. "We have to destroy it and free them." Kara reached for the iron hammer they had prepared. She felt the air around her boiling, as if the spirits were urging her to complete this task. She took one last look at Mason, then raised the hammer high, ready to strike the black heart in the chest. As soon as the hammer touched the heart, a piercing scream rang out from all directions. The whole room shook more violently than ever, and the heart began to contract, convulsing in pain. The red lights on the walls flared up, then went out. The black heart shattered into pieces, and the surrounding spirit figures suddenly dissipated into thin smoke as if they had been released. Kara and Mason collapsed to the floor, panting, sweat pouring down their foreheads. The space was eerily quiet, but the cold air had disappeared. The spirits in the house had finally been released. Briarwood Manor seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if it had accomplished its mission. The brick walls and foundations, which had withstood centuries of the curse, now seemed ready to crumble. Kara and Mason knew they didn't have much time. They quickly left the basement, stepping out of the house one last time before it collapsed completely, taking the remnants of its dark past with it. Kara stood outside, watching Briarwood Manor fall into ruins. She knew the war was over, but a part of her had been lost along the way. The curse had been broken, but the wounds it left would forever remain in her heart. Kara stood before the ruins of Briarwood Manor, feeling both triumph and loss. The spirits had been released. The curse finally ended after centuries of suffering. But Kara knew that this ending would not bring complete peace. The feeling that something was left unsolved, that the darkness was still watching over her, still haunted her. When Kara returned home from the final battle in Briarwood, she tried to settle into a normal life. But as the night fell, the darkness became more dense and menacing than ever. Every little noise in her apartment would startle her. The living room lights would sometimes go out for no apparent reason. Dreams of Amelia's spirits and the others haunted her, as if they had never left this world. Mason, her close companion throughout her journey in Briarwood, is also haunted. He visits Kara several times after the fall of Briarwood Manor, but each time he visits, they both sense something strange in the air. Mason believes that although they have destroyed the Black Heart and freed the spirits, the darkness within Briarwood has not completely disappeared. Kara, Mason said during one of his visits, his voice filled with concern, "I think maybe we freed the spirits, but there's still a stronger force at work. That shadow, it can't just disappear like that." Kara knew what Mason meant. She had felt it ever since Briarwood Manor fell. Some of the curse had ended, but the darkness still hung over her soul, an unyielding shadow. She wondered if she had awakened something worse, not a curse, but a force sealed away with the house. One night, as Kara lay in bed, she was awakened by a strange noise coming from outside her window. She sat up, looking out at the darkness that had enveloped the city. For a moment, she sensed something standing outside, staring at her through the glass. She walked towards the window, but when she opened the curtains, all she saw was the silent night. But the feeling of unease did not go away, and the faint whisper still echoed in her mind. "We are still here." Kara stepped back, her heart pounding. It was a spirit's voice, but not like the one she'd heard in Briarwood Manor. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a warning. The next morning, Kara went to Mason to discuss what she had experienced. Mason listened carefully, his eyes filled with concern. After Kara finished, he paused for a moment before saying, "Kara, I think we haven't really faced the true darkness behind the curse. The souls we freed were its victims, but the shadow, the force we unwittingly awakened, still exists." Kara nodded. She knew Mason was right. The strange phenomena continued and seemed to be growing more intense. The shadow was more than just a supernatural force. It was a part of Briarwood, a part of the past that could not be erased by destroying a cursed object. "We have to face it," Kara said, her eyes full of determination. "Whatever it is, I can't live with this fear forever." If it's not completely gone, it will continue to haunt us both." Mason looked at Kara for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but this time we'll have to be more prepared. That shadow, it may not be just a supernatural entity, but a power that has existed for centuries." The two begin to dig deeper into the history of the Briarwood family, not only about the curse, but also about the dark rituals that Kara's ancestors participated in. They find records of a secret organization that performed rituals to summon entities from the dark, part of a larger force that no one dares to speak of. Kara and Mason come to understand that the Briarwood curse is just part of a larger plan. The shadow they are facing is not just a cursed spirit, but an evil entity summoned from another world. And now, with the Briarwood house destroyed, the shadow has escaped and is roaming freely among their world. That night, Kara and Mason decided to return to the ruins of Briarwood Manor. They knew that only at the place where it all began could they face this darkness and end it once and for all. When they arrived, the ruins of Briarwood Manor still lay silent under the pale moonlight. The wind blew gently through the ruins, making a cold whistling sound. Kara felt the presence of the shadow more clearly than ever. It was there, waiting for them. The two of them entered the heart of the ruins, the basement that once held the Black Heart. Kara could feel the life in the land itself, as if the house had collapsed, but its darkness still filled the air. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, accompanied by a growl that echoed from deep within the earth. The ground shook, and before Kara's eyes, a giant black shadow appeared. It had no clear shape, just a dark mass, twisting and shifting. Its glowing red eyes stared at Kara and Mason as if challenging them. "We have to do something," Mason shouted, his voice lost in the howling wind. Kara stared into the shadow, unflinching. She knew that this shadow could not be destroyed by force. It was the remnant of a curse, a part of the dark past her family had created. And to end it, she had to face the truth. She was the final key to undoing it all. Kara stepped toward the shadow while Mason stood still, staring after her. She closed her eyes, focusing all her energy on herself, on the Briarwood blood that flowed through her. She felt the darkness begin to surround her, as if it were trying to swallow her. But this time, Kara did not retreat. She raised her arms, facing the giant shadow, and shouted, "I do not fear you. My blood will end you. You have lived too long in hatred. It is time to end." As Kara spoke those words, the shadow began to shrink, screeching in pain. A blinding light burst from Kara's hand, tearing the darkness apart. The strong wind gradually calmed down, and in a moment, the darkness was completely gone. Kara stood up and looked up at the clear night sky. She knew her journey was over. Despite the loss and pain, she had done what no one in the Briarwood family had ever done. She had faced the darkness and conquered it. The darkness has finally cleared, but in Kara's mind, memories and pain remain. She has done the impossible, faced and destroyed the Great Shadow, an evil entity that has haunted the Briarwood family for centuries. But she knows that the journey is not truly over. There is a greater truth she has yet to reach, a secret that Briarwood Manor and her own family have tried to keep hidden. Kara stood before the ruins of Briarwood Manor, her eyes fixed on the ash-covered ruins. In the pale light of dawn, the house seemed like a hazy memory fading into the past. But there was something about the air around her that made Kara uneasy. Though the shadow had been destroyed, an uneasy feeling still hung over her. Mason stood beside her, his hand clasped tightly around Kara's arm, as if they were seeking comfort from each other after what they had been through. "We did it, Kara," Mason whispered, but there was a hint of hesitation in his voice. He could sense that something wasn't quite over. Kara nodded slightly, but she knew there was a missing piece. "Mason, I still feel like something is wrong. Everything just seems too easy." She paused, her eyes scanning the scene around her as if searching for a trace of the truth that was still hidden. Mason looked at her, concern in his eyes. "You think there's something else?" Kara wasn't sure, but she felt it in the back of her mind. The shadow had been destroyed, but the puzzle of the curse and the Briarwood family's past still left many holes unanswered. After returning home, Kara decided to dig deeper into the history of the Briarwood family. The documents she had read before weren't enough to answer everything. She knew that the story of the witch betrayed and the curse was only part of the bigger picture. If the curse could haunt her family for generations, then there had to be something bigger going on, a deeper, darker secret. Kara returned to the Savannah Public Library, looking for documents she had never encountered before. After hours of digging through notebooks and historical documents, she found a thin book hidden in a hidden corner of the library. The book had no clear title, but inside it was the record of a secret group that practiced dark rituals, said to have existed for centuries. According to the book, this secret group had close ties to the Briarwood family. They used dark powers to protect the family's wealth and power, but at a terrible price. Each generation of the family had to sacrifice a member to the darkness. Kara shuddered when she read this part. The shadow she had destroyed represented the remnants of the dark pact her ancestors had made. Kara returns to the ruins of Briarwood Manor at night, where she feels the strongest connection to her family's past. In the quiet darkness, she feels an invisible force pulling her closer to the truth. Kara's heart pounded. This book had belonged to her great-grandmother, and it might be the final key to solving all the mysteries. She sat down in the rubble, her hands shaking as she flipped through the pages. The first few pages contained details Kara already knew: dark rituals, curses, and the betrayal the Briarwood family had inflicted on witches. But in the final pages, there is a horrifying confession that Kara never expected. I, Amelia Briarwood, was the one who summoned the shadow. It was not the witch who cursed us, but I, in order to protect my family, performed that dark ritual. I cannot forgive myself. The shadow has consumed everything, and it will continue to consume until the Briarwood family no longer exists. Kara couldn't believe her eyes. It was Amelia, her great-grandmother, who had created the shadow, not to protect the family from the curse, but to preserve the Briarwood family's power and wealth. The witch had cursed the family for their betrayal, but the shadow Kara fought wasn't the witch's creation. It was the product of her own family. The truth is finally revealed. The Briarwood family is not the victims, but the main culprits in this story. The curse is only a small part of the price they have to pay. Kara feels a pang of pain when she realizes that it is her own blood that has sown this darkness. But now, with the shadow destroyed, Kara knew that she was the only one who could end it all. She couldn't change the past, but she could make sure that the Briarwood family would no longer be cursed by the mistakes of the past. Kara stood up, her eyes looking out at the silent night sky. The truth had finally been revealed, and Kara was ready to accept her responsibility. She was the last of the Briarwoods, and she would not let the darkness return. Everything was quieter than ever. No more whispers in the night, no more feeling of being watched from the shadows. After all the events she had been through, Kara had finally found the peace she had always craved. But more than that, she sensed that the souls that had been imprisoned in Briarwood Manor had also been released. One autumn morning, as the warm sunlight gently filtered through the window, Kara sat at her desk, looking out at the peaceful street outside. She had not written for a long time after facing the darkness in Briarwood, but now inspiration seemed to be returning to her. She opened her notebook and wrote down the first lines of her journey. She wanted to write the story of Briarwood Manor not only as a supernatural adventure book, but also as a way to free herself. Kara believed that this story needed to be told, not only to remind her of the past, but also to close a dark chapter in her life and the Briarwood family. Mason visited her often. He too had found peace after the curse was broken. Each time they visited, they would sit together, sharing memories of their journey, of the fears they had overcome together. Although their relationship had begun on a dangerous mission, they now had a connection stronger than anything else. One afternoon, as they sat together at their favorite coffee shop, Mason looked at Kara with a small smile. "Did you ever think we would find peace like this?" he asked, his voice warm. Kara smiled softly, looking into his eyes. "No," she replied, "but I've learned that peace doesn't always come from running away from the past, but from facing it and accepting it." Mason nodded in agreement, then looked out into the distance where the afternoon sun was sinking below the horizon. "Have you thought about writing this story?" Kara mused, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, I will. But not just my story, but the story of my family, of those who have been trapped in the darkness for centuries. And when I'm done, it will be my way of closing the final chapter of Briarwood." As time passed, Briarwood Manor gradually faded into the past, remaining only in the memories of those who knew it. The ruins of the house were cleared away, and the land where it once stood became an empty field. No one spoke of the strange events that had occurred, and the stories of the cursed house gradually faded into oblivion. On a peaceful morning, as the sun shone brightly over the city of Savannah, Kara stood in front of the empty lot where Briarwood Manor once stood. She closed her eyes, feeling the gentle breeze blow past, and in that moment, she felt an unusual peace. The spirits had been released, and the Briarwood family could finally rest in peace. Kara smiled softly. Despite all the pain and fear she had been through, she knew that it was over. The peace she had longed for had finally come, not just for her, but for all the souls trapped in the darkness of Briarwood. Kara turned and left the grounds for the last time. It was time for her to move on and start a new chapter in her life, no longer forced to compete by the past. And within her, a gentle, peaceful feeling spread. Yet, deep down, a part of Kara still felt like something was missing. Though the darkness had been defeated, she couldn't completely shake off the feeling of being watched. It was just small signs, fleeting sensations, a sudden cold wind blowing through the warm sun, the echo of footsteps as she walked through her empty apartment, or strange looks from strangers on the street. Kara told herself it was just her sensitivity after the horrors of Briarwood, but she couldn't shake the anxiety completely.